AI is getting its fingers in everything.
Yeah.
Um, some of it's good, some of it's scary, but there are ways it is to create a dramatic amount of efficiencies it is for small business by leveraging different um, tools and technologies that AI is bringing to the forefront for really cost efficient. And whether that's marketing, financial statements, reporting, website build, whatever it is, there's 1,000 tools for every different aspect of your business. So long as that does not diminish your customer experience, you should explore it. And so those tools are allowing entrepreneurs now, I think, to do more with less and less expensive.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, we know where Canada is, and British Columbia on the west coast, right. And then Prince George, we know the big city there called Vancouver, right? Where are you? Me, meaning, we are 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers. And it's a relatively nice community of about 80,000 people. It is lots of forest all around us. Within 50 miles, we have 100 lakes. And we have lots of other friends here, like black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, deer, wolves, foxes, you name it. I call it paradise. Today, we have an interesting podcast with Jeremy Hill. And Jeremy is a distinguished entrepreneur and a founder of 25 years of experience in private marketing, capital markets, in particular small, medium-sized companies, I believe, and an expert in particular in areas that are delicate and difficult to finance in a lot of cases. And how much more appropriate can it be than today in mid 2025, when there is so much turmoil around the world, around capital and around industry and all the other kind of things. We found an expert, and Jeremy, tell us all about it, and tell us about your past. You're from which areas, you took your training through there and all the other places, and obviously then became a very successful advisor and entrepreneur. And so take us all the way through there.
Dude, what a great introduction. Thanks, John. Well, first, looking forward to sharing some time and having a great conversation and a good cup of coffee, and hopefully providing something it is that the listeners want to listen to. So I used to be in Seattle, so I'm familiar with Vancouver and Prince George, and you are absolutely spot on. You live in paradise. What a beautiful part of the world. It's a great spot. So as we talk and as we record this today, I live in Paradise Valley, Arizona now. And like you said, I've been in kind of finance, small business entrepreneurship, and primarily kind of private capital markets, meaning non-traditional capital markets. So, non-bank financing. So, and that's a broad world. I've been doing that for about 25 years. So, quick fast forward, grew up in the South, grew up in Texas, moved all over as a kid. I went to high school in Seattle, university back in Texas, and then ended up back in Seattle between my junior and senior year of university. Met this super hot chick who's now my wife. Lied to her, told her I was going to be rich and famous and good looking and all this shit, and like, stick with me, baby. It's going to be great. And, for whatever reason, she believed me,
and still does.
Yeah, and still does. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But now we are approaching 30 years married here in a couple of months, and have 3 awesome kids. And so I've got a super hot wife and 3 awesome kids and a cool dog, and life is pretty good. So no complaints. So the question for you on how the finance journey started, I think a lot of people that are in this space, that are in either finance or investment banking or M&A or whatever it is, have probably more of a traditional training or background. They went to B school, they had maybe parents in finance or law or one thing or another. And mine was definitely different. It was probably more defensive Grew up in somewhat of an entrepreneurial family, but went to school and ultimately ended up dropping out of university between my junior and senior year of college because I was just trying to, I don't know, I wanted to be different, right? And that path, even though I was just about finished, that path just didn't really speak to me. Like something else was pulling at me to be not one of many, whatever that means at the time. And so I got in the real estate. Well, I guess before we got in the real estate business, my wife and I had started, 6 or 7 different businesses. Um, one or two went okay. Most went to crap, because we were young and dumb and stupid and broke and just trying to figure shit out. And ultimately had a little mobile phone business that did well, and it was me and a partner, and then it was me and a partner and a couple of guys, and then it was me and a partner and 10, and then 20, and then 50, and then we had about 80 guys at the time, and became what was called the largest master agent, which is basically an unemployed sales force. It's not as cool as it sounds.
Yeah.
In the Pacific Northwest for a long, long time, and launched a couple of big brands and made a fair amount of money at 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, and enjoyed that. Um, my wife got pregnant. I felt like it is that I needed to be a grown up, right? Like I should probably have health insurance if we're going to have a kid. That'd be nice,
Exactly.
and wear a suit and tie to work and be responsible and get one of those little badges on my belt that'll get me in the door, and so I can be proud of myself, or her parents would be proud of me, or whatever. I realized I'm a horrible employee. I had 13 jobs in 3 years. It would either quit or get fired within a couple of months, and I just wasn't good at that because I was called for something else.
We call that camp inspectors.
Call it what?
Camp inspectors.
Totally.
They
Yes.
just stay there long enough to get to know the camp, then they go to another camp. No, I'm just
That's
kidding.
perfectly said, and that's about spot on, right? So I was trying to figure myself out. I got in the real estate business. I really always enjoyed watching things come together. Like I love people moving dirt. I love watching buildings get built, holes get dug, and stuff coming together, and kind of the artistry and the architecture and the engineering of either a building or a home or something coming together. I love that. Got in the real estate business and got bored with it in about a year. The I think the typical path of entry for most people in the real estate business is you become a real estate agent or real estate broker or real estate salesperson, which is fine. And there's plenty of those guys that do extraordinarily well. But there was 30,000 real estate agents in Washington, and now there's 30,001, and everybody's smarter than the other guy. And I was
Yeah,
like, that business sucks. I don't want to do
yeah,
that. And it doesn't suck. It's great for some people, and I know people that are extraordinarily successful, and it just wasn't what I was meant to do. And so I started looking at the other side of the coin on all of these things that are getting built and put together and this kind of a thing. Where's ultimately that money coming from? Like I know some comes from bank and some comes from rich guys, but like where's the rest of it come? And like over this little kind of period of time, we started um, being the guy behind the scenes that was putting these deals together. And we did one by accident and another one kind of by accident more. And then those little accidents started developing a formula to, well, maybe there's a business behind that. And 25 years later, we're about $2.2 billion or so in financing and advisory in that space, with about half of that being real estate, right? Bricks and sticks and putting stuff together. The other half of that really in kind of growing small businesses, right? So these guys that are past the friends and family, mom and dad, rich uncle round raising capital, but they're really not yet to a point to where any of the smart money wants to pay attention, right? You're not raising institutional capital. BlackRock's not calling you, but I need something different than what my knucklehead banker down the street can do for me. So if I don't
exactly.
need that and I don't get this, then what do I do?
Yeah.
Right? Like we got really good at that.
And that's the niche that
And that's,
is
yeah,
all over the world the same, and Canada the same. Is where do you find that building companies and being successful, then it's always size is critical,
it is.
in terms of access to capital, but also in terms of management. And how do you go through that to something that has potential, but also find a way to show the model is working, but not yet ready for bankers to, the traditional bankers to hurry up and say, we want to get involved, but before that.
Yeah.
And that's the group that can see the opportunity And that's where the niche fits, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Yeah.
No, it really is. I mean, there's 1,000 different flavors of finance, from startup to small business to asset-based lending to royalty-based financing to litigation finance to on and on. I mean, there's just 1,000 ways it is to do this. Um, the challenge is for most entrepreneurs, for John and Jeremy's, coffee shop, construction business, software business, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is that we do, there's 1,000 different ways to finance it. And the challenge is the majority of entrepreneurs or small business owners, they are so in the thick of running the business and putting out fires and doing what they're doing. All they know is, I need $1 million to do X, or 100 grand to do Y, or $10 million to buy my competitor, whatever it is. And I don't care if it comes from John, if it comes from Jeremy, if it comes from the Easter Bunny, if it comes from Santa Claus. I don't care who it comes from. Just somebody go solve that so I can get back to work. And and the reality is that all of those different, sources and slices and pieces of capital all operate differently. They all have different expectations. They all have different levels of commitment from you as the small business owner, the entrepreneur. And and there just needs to be a dramatic degree of more thought that goes into the type of capital it is that you're bringing into your business based upon actually what you're trying to do with it, right? Like, do you just want to live and grow? Are you building to sell? Do you have partners? Do you not have partners? Do you want to give debt, give up, equity? Do you just want to raise debt? Like, there's 1,000 different ways it is to do this, and people need to be a little bit more thoughtful rather than just taking a check and 6 months later, a year later, you're thinking, oh, shit, man, I should have done that, right?
Okay. So, what is interesting about it, Jeremy, that I'm hearing, and I'm an entrepreneur, been in business for more than 50 years here with some of the companies that I have. And so, where did you get the experience? And did it start with you in Seattle in your early 20s? You got married, fell in love with your beautiful wife, and so who must also had an appetite for entrepreneurship, because otherwise you wouldn't have been. You cannot be successful unless you have support on the inside, meaning partnership, wife, whatever. You must have that support, and you did a number of businesses. Some of them were successful, other ones
Mhm.
were not so successful. So the point that I'm simply making, you made all the mistakes. The best experience is not, with all due respect, not the MBAs that we earn at universities, but we learned on the street by doing it, and
100%
failing at
agree.
falling and standing up, falling over down again, and staying the course, and keep building. Don't give up. Be innovative, and that's basically what I'm still doing here. He's still at nearly 85. I have 10 different companies, and in spite of all of the things that are going on, we're still building. We're still going forward, forward, forward. But access to capital always has been the biggest challenge. Where traditional capital, you're not quite there. When you're there, then everybody wants to be in. How do you get there is the key.
Yeah. I think, I could not agree with you more about the fact is that, everybody has a different path. And I think for those folks, it is that did not go the traditional path of going to school and then getting an MBA and then doing an internship and then doing this and then doing this. And then you work for an investment bank for a couple of years and then you get into private equity and then you ultimately start your own deal at 50, right? Like, that's cool. That's not most people. And so for me, that wasn't my path for whatever reason. Same thing, John, it doesn't sound like it is that was yours. There is a time in everybody's life, though, it is to where, for me, I don't know if you did this, to where I was a little bit maybe envious of that. Like, God, man, maybe I should have gone to business school, or maybe I should have done that iBanking internship, or maybe I should. The reality is, though, there's only so many things that books can teach you, right? Like, you eventually have to do your own push-ups, right? Like, you eventually have to actually go out and do this on your own and try and succeed and fail and get punched in the mouth and
Oh,
lose somebody's money and lose
I'm
your own money
losing
and all
contact.
these other.
We were talking about the starting in a different way, and it's not through the normal system, but from the ground up. Now, I just give you just a little bit of my background. I was born in 1940 in northeastern Holland, and that was during the war years. And in particular, obviously, April, May to me are very important months because it was 80 years ago, in April of 1945, that we were liberated in the place that we lived by the Canadian Army as part of the Allied forces that landed in Normandy in the summer in June of 1944 actually, and so then made their way through Europe to liberate it. The Canadians went north through France, Belgium, and then the west side of Holland, and then pushed the German armies back out. We were about 10, 15 minutes from the border. So saw far too much that we should not have seen, and it was difficult times, and still affected me in terms of PTSD, still part of me, the inner child, very much part of me. Academically, I was not a success story either. I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7 3 times, and so then they said to my dad, "What are you going to do with this guy?" And he said, "Maybe send him to the mentally challenged school." They said, "No, we're not going to do that." So they said, my dad had a friend that had a furniture factory, and so they said, "Let's make him a furniture maker." And my grandfather was a master carpenter, and my dad worked in lumber. So at 12 and a half years old, I started working as a laborer in a furniture factory. And I loved it. And in the evenings, I would go to become a furniture maker. And so I developed two dreams that became foundational to my life. Is that we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. It made such an impression on me that I always knew I would go to the lands of my heroes, Canada. And I did when I was 24. And then the other part was that I was never at peace with me. Why am I different than everybody else? When I failed grade 7 for the third time, the friends that I used to have that went on to college, university, were no longer friends and not longer wanted me to associate with them necessarily because I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then it was a challenge for me, and I always wanted to, I was always an optimist, but I wanted to prove to me that I was just as smart as everybody else, not smarter than, but just as smart. And so I decided to go to Canada in July of 1965, and I wanted to start with nothing. So I took a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and couldn't speak the language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. But I knew I wanted to go to the West Coast or to British Columbia because that's where all the trees are, and that's where I want to build a lumber mill. And so that was my dream. And so when I landed in Montreal in July of 1965, took the train across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights. My God, that's a long way. And so when I arrived in Vancouver, I went to the immigration department and couldn't speak the language, didn't know soul, and didn't have a job, obviously. And so I couldn't speak the language. And so fortunately, it was a German fellow. And I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a lumber mill. He said, "Go to Prince George. That's where they're building mills, and that's where all the timber is." And so I took the bus 13 hours to Prince George. That's where I now am 60 years later. And I can still see the area. The Greyhound station was here. And I stepped off the bus, and I had my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47.
Oh my gosh.
But what I did have is attitude. I've always been positive. I always still now avoid the negative. Don't even come near me. And then secondly, passion. Whatever I do, I give it 125%. And then the other one is work ethic. I work harder than anybody, and even today at nearly 85, I still get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And still, I do all the things that I'm doing. Is that I got a close call that triggered me. I already became a supervisor in a sawmill. He started as cleaner man, lumber parlor, and within a year and a half, I was a supervisor, and then very quickly thereafter, the superintendent of one of the largest sawmills here in northern British Columbia. And so, but that didn't go fast enough for me, and I then started my company, the Brink Forest Products in 1975 with 3 employees and myself, and then from there on expanded it into the Brink group of companies. Now we have 10 different companies, but the silos are, the one silo is lumber manufacturing, the other silo is warehousing, distribution, logistics, and the other silo is real estate, residential, commercial, and industrial, and then the other silo is media. And part of that is writing books. I'm an author. I've done 5 books, and I'm working on the 6th and the 7th. And then the other one is obviously podcasting, and I'm planning to do a platform as well. So that's kind of where I am. But the other part that would
What are you doing in all your spare time?
and I was hoping you would ask that, because a lot of people say to me is, how do you do all this stuff and all the other stuff? I say it relates to the second book that I wrote. The first one that I wrote, a lot of people said to me, you're such an interesting life, you should write a book about it. And I thought about, writing books is not easy. And so what I did is, for 20 years I started, I stopped, I started, I stopped, I started, on and on and on. And then something happened that triggered me. My wife, equally like yours, she is pretty, beautiful, very, very, I was in love with her and all of those kind of things when I met her about 40 years ago. And then we got married, and so we're still together. And she's been quite supportive of me, obviously, but she is very sensitive to diet. She's a vegetarian. And I probably didn't listen as well as I should, and I got, in 2008, a very, very close call. I nearly died. I had a case of diverticulitis that ruptured my colon, put all the toxins through my body, and I waited too long before I went to the hospital, to the doctor. And the morning after they took 20 centimeters out of my colon, their doc said, you came this close. And so by then, I already was, 68 years old. And, so I knew that I had to take this much more serious. So I did before the same as so many other people do. And the end of the year, I always make a commitment to do this, that, and that, and I'm going to buy a membership to the gym. And so then 2 weeks later, I can find 100 reasons why I'm too busy to go to the gym. So I changed that. I stayed in the gym. I got a trainer, and it became a big part of my life in terms of going to the gym. The other part is diet became very, very important to me. And so I became vegan to a certain extent. And, so that's been part of my life. And then the other part was that, again, on my book, and as I reached already the middle of my 60s and approaching my 70s, if I don't write the book now, it will never happen. And so I started thinking about the book, started putting it together. So this is the book, Against All Odds. It took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And so it became very, very popular, actually. And then from there on in, I felt I had to write another book. Another thing that happened to me is something that you may find interesting, is that I didn't feel good about all the things that I was doing and all the successes that I already had, a number of companies. I didn't feel good about who am I? Why was it so much of a challenge to me? And why am I different than all the other people that went on to colleges and university? In Holland, it was always a question of no matter what happens in your life, you get married, you get a job, or you want to become an entrepreneur, you talk to a banker, it's always a question, where are your diplomas? I don't have diplomas. So that, so in any event, so one day I walked into a store here in Prince George. It was in January of 1997. I picked up a book. I still have the book here, and so I don't know why I picked it up. And the title of the book was "Driven to Distraction," written by Dr. Edward M. Hollywell. And I picked this book up, and I wrote on the bottom, January 1997. Dr. Hollywell has written 18 books, 5 on distraction, is known around the globe as an expert. He's a doctorate, PhD, all of those things. He wrote a book about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, that's me. He has dyslexia and ADHD. And I said, when I picked up the book, I said, oh my God, that's me. So I wrote in it in Dutch because I was ashamed of it, because there was an implication that it is a mental disorder of some description and the stigma attached to it. And so I wrote in there, now I finally know who I am. And it was January 1997.
Wow.
That part changed my life. And so from that point forward, I started to read more about it, look at it more on Google, read more books about it, and then came to the conclusion it's a superpower. And I believe it is. Now, the interesting part about it is, Jeremy, is that you're my podcast number 416. My podcast 203 was done with Dr. Hollywell, who wrote this book in 1993. I bought it in 1997. It changed my life and the understanding about, I had no idea ADHD, never even heard of it, didn't have a clue. But it became part of my life. Now, the interesting part is on the interview, and for those people that are watching us from around the world, that virtually everybody is touched by ADHD directly or indirectly. They will have friends around them that are benefiting from them, in my opinion, or affected by it in some form. So when I had my podcast with Dr. Hollywell, I believe that probably a substantial number of people, maybe 8 to 10% of the people, are benefiting or affected by ADHD. But then the more I found out about it, then I believe it's probably more like 20%. So I suggested to Dr. Hollywell in our podcast, On the Brink, podcast number 203, I suggested to him that, in my opinion, it likely is 20%. He said, no, John, it's probably 25% or even more. I agree with him. Now, the other part that I found in my involvement with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of businesses where I'm on the board and have met a lot of successful individuals, that I believe, and I suggested that to Dr. Hollywell, is that from my experience, I believe of the people that are successful, the operative is successful in business and entrepreneurs and other people, that probably 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, probably 75%. I agree with him. And so that brought me to my second book that I felt I had to write about, and I did that, ADHD Unlocked. And so, that part became a very, very important part of my life in terms of, understanding ADHD and starting to be more vocal about it in terms of that I believe it is not an adversity. It can well be a benefit. And so that part changed my life. So if the question, as you asked me earlier at the beginning of me explaining it, is that I had to put it in perspective first, is that how do you do all the things that you do? ADHD. That's how I do it.
Good. Lots of things going on at one time. And you don't sleep very much, I would imagine.
I sleep fast.
You sleep fast. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So, but business to me has always been very, very important. And so, and so I did all of that. Now, the other part that I believe is very important, and in particular in your case as well, the first thing that strikes me when I looked at your bio, you're a unique individual that must have had a very unconventional foundation in terms of your experiences, because you could not gain that experience anywhere else, certainly not in the schooling system and or universities or whatever you want to follow. So it had to be something very, very interesting. The other part about it is that, and I'm writing a book about that now that comes out in June, July, you must be and you are a very good communicator.
I would say I'm pretty good at that. Yes.
You must be. And so, as you already can see on the back here, that's my book that is coming out in July.
Oh, amazing. Love that.
You know, and and so that combination of all the above, that for me was a challenge, because I grew up in, as I said, in northeastern Holland, and we spoke dialect there. The dialect they speak in the province of Groningen is that if I speak dialect, people in most of Holland will not understand me because they don't understand. They will come to the conclusion I'm probably a farmer. So are you from Groningen? Oh, you're probably a farmer, right? So it was already a bit of a liability. And so I had to go from speaking dialect. I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force when I was 18. So I had to then learn to speak High Dutch when I was in the Air Force for a little bit longer than 2 years, actually. It was a good experience. And then after I barely got out of there, worked in the industry for about 2 years, and then decided to go to Canada and I'd start all over again learning to speak English.
My goodness, what a story you have.
Yeah. So now coming back to you, is that in listen, a lot of people are listening to us. What do you recommend to those individuals that are the ones that you focus on in particular? Small to
For the ones that
mid-sized
I focus on
companies.
for,
By
I'm
me?
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, small to mid-sized companies
Mhm.
that have gone through the process of having an expertise, usually in ownership, partnerships, ownership, whatever the structure may be, that have knowledge in certain areas, but to go to the next step is the critical part, because one of the most important part of companies are right sizing the company. If you grow too
Absolutely.
fast, it could become a problem. If you grow too slow, it becomes a problem. So what do you recommend for those companies that have a good foundation, good potential, stable management, all those critical elements that are not quite where they are, but are going in the right direction? What do you recommend to them?
I think there's a couple things. I think, first, often when companies are starting out or individuals are starting out, they're in that first, year, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the business. You find it is that a lot of people, it is that you attract to you are versions of you, right? Like um, they have qualities and maybe characteristics and personalities it is that are maybe similar to John or similar to Jeremy or similar to, right? And you do that. Um, if you really want your business to grow, the things it is that I was not good at early that I became better at over time is understanding that I needed to hire for my weaknesses. Like, I don't need 10 people in the business that are just like me, right? I'm a pain in the ass enough. There doesn't need to be 10 more of me, right? I need to have there are 2 or 3 things it is that I am extraordinarily good at in my business. And all that that means is there's 100 things that I'm not very good at, right?
Gotcha.
So I need to make sure that I am I am doing the things it is to where we get the maximum amount of output for the degree it is that I am involved with. And the other things it is that I'm not good at, I'm finding somebody it is that is great at that, because that forms kind of a puzzle piece to where it is that they fit with what it is that I'm weak at, and collectively better we're stronger. And then I fill in puzzle pieces it is that complement both of us. And then the next one, and then it actually is kind of like building out a puzzle, right? You get a box and you get a puzzle and you get the little corner edges it is, right? The cornerstones of your business. You get these corner edges, and then you kind of fill in the puzzle pieces it is that fit, and it starts kind of developing this picture, this kind of manuscript of a business it is that can grow. I would say that that's the first thing. Um, the second thing it is for growing businesses it is that I think is undervalued is you really need to understand the value of good financial statements and of good financial practices. Oftentimes, growing businesses, you're kind of just cobbling stuff together. Anybody that'll help me, I'll take the help, because I'm working 25 hours a day and I'm not sleeping, and all these kinds of things, right? So anybody that's willing to help me will help me. What happens with that for the financial aspect of the business is you've got, your nephew or your brother or your cousin-in-law, or, whatever it is, who's who lives in a garage in California, who's doing your books, right? Well, that might work when you're just starting somebody to help, but as you're growing, as you take on more customers, as you look at bringing in, a special kind of lender or investor or otherwise, like, that doesn't work anymore. And so the value of your business oftentimes will be driven by the quality of your investment into your financial statements. And
Right.
that needs to be really good. And not only does it need to be good, you need to understand it. And you need to look at it early, week by week, and then month by month, and then a little bit further to see where things are trending and see where maybe there's some water leaking out of the boat, to maybe see where you can put some gas on other. Like, you have to do that. When we're investing in companies, that is one of the habits that we try to train. Like, I won't require audited financial statements the first year, but oftentimes by the second or third year in our business, I want to drive that less because I want you to go spend $50,000 on an audit, but more so on the fact it is that I want you to understand the value of investing in those financial statements for the benefit of your business going forward after I'm not involved, right? Like, we
Gotcha.
want to train those disciplines. I think the third thing, and this is really relative to the time today, um, AI is getting its fingers in everything.
Yeah.
Um, some of it's good, some of it's scary, but there are ways it is to create a dramatic amount of efficiencies it is for small business by leveraging different um, tools and technologies that AI is bringing to the forefront for really cost efficient. And whether that's marketing, financial statements, reporting, website build, whatever it is, there's 1,000 tools for every different aspect of your business. So long as that does not diminish your customer experience, you should explore it. And so those tools are allowing entrepreneurs now, I think, to do more with less and less expensive. Um, those are kind of 3 things right out of the gate that I would definitely tell people early on it is to make sure that they're paying attention to.
The interesting part about those comments, in my opinion, Jeremy, are, and I agree with you, AI 3, 4, 5 years ago, you would have not had that. You wouldn't even have talked about AI, but it shows us the influence it will have. It will touch every element of our lives, every element of our companies, potentially. The genie will not go back in the bottle. It is there now, and the impact of it will be even more significant or equally likely more than computers did to us in the early 80s and beyond.
Agreed. And you're right. It's the genie's not going back in the bottle. Um, it's kind of like 20 years afterwards. You remember when they were talking about, well, we should put a tax on email. Never going to happen, right? Genie's out of the bottle. Same thing with AI. I think Elon had some comments over the last year. It is that when he was early involved with OpenAI, saying it is that at some point in time, like there needs to be a line that we don't go past. And I don't think it is that we brought in a degree of pragmatism there that says that just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Definitely.
And right now, AI seems to not have a governor on it, and it is getting its fingers everywhere. Some are good, but some are probably not good.
Right. But it will be there. It will become a very critical part, as you said, in your elements 1, 2, 3, and AI being one of them shows the direction, and I agree with that, where things are going. They will affect every element of an operational side of our companies as well as our management side, and then the other part that's important for and I'd like you to touch on that as a company that is still growing, although we are a sizable company, mid-size, in my opinion, still looking for growth. I always must look forward, and I believe one of the elements that benefited me with ADHD somehow is that I've always been good at numbers, even when I was in the lower grades and grade 3 and grade 7, and I've always been a good writer, not a reader, because I have dyslexia and ADHD. And then the other part that I have has always been beneficial to me. I have an amazing memory. Still, even now I do. And a lot of times I give presentations, but I seldom use notes, even in presentations that are an hour and a half long, is because I will recall my presentations, and I again the benefit of directly ADHD. I'm not sure how they are connected, but maybe that was one of the benefits. And then the other one is that I'm a very good strategic thinker looking forward. Not if I look at lumber, if I look at location, if I look at warehousing, I look at real estate and the areas that I'm involved in the broader area, as to where do we go from here, and how can we, with all our different silos, be part of that growth, and how do we bring ourselves to the next level from where we are now, which is meaning delicate time, and especially now, with all the realities of the things that are happening in the world substantially because of American policy. Trump comes to mind in terms of tariffs and all the other issues, trade restrictions. Everything is changing and evolving, but still we have to work our way through it. And I'm always looking for, as soon as there is change or difficulty, it also means there is opportunity. And so
Agreed.
that's kind of the way I look at it. And for our companies, all of them together, is saying, how do we find capital to support our strategic plan to move forward with all the different silos? And that goes beyond being small to how do you get to the next step, to a medium. Once you do that, like in my case, I've been in business now for 50 years, and so have solid companies obviously survived through all the ups and downs. Now we are at the point of saying, how do we go to the next level? that obviously and because of and because of the adversity and because of the change and the benefits, there is time for opportunity.
Yeah, agreed. I think, as your business is growing, you can decide on I think there's a couple of key decisions that you make. Is you can either grow by, if you've got 100 customers, 1,000 customers, whatever the number is, right? You can take those 100 customers and just sell them more. You can deliver more value to who it is that you're already selling to. Um, or you can deliver the same value instead of to 100 customers to 1,000 customers. And both of them work. You just have to decide which one is for you, right? I think that's it. I think the other thing is you're getting ready to grow. Are you growing for growth sake? Are you growing because I want to go from revenue A to revenue B? Or is it, if I go, is it a vanity play? Is it you want to make more money? Is it you want to provide more value? Is it, what is it there? People need to decide. I think before you go raise capital, you also have to have a decision of what kind of business are you? Like, why are you in business? Is this a lifestyle business? Like, this is me and my wife and my boys and my kids, and this is what it is that we're doing and growing, and we're just enjoying the fruits of our labor from living our life while doing business. And those businesses often become family businesses, and the business pays for your house and your boat and your dog and all the stuff it is that you do.
Yeah.
But that's often not a business that you're building with the intent to monetize or sell down the road.
No.
And so if you are building a business with the intent that, in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, I'm going to sell this business, your decision making is different. The way that you raise capital or give up equity or don't is going to be different along the way. And so I think people need to get a really good kind of understanding of who they are, what kind of business they are, why they're in business, what they want to do with it before they make those decisions on, should I bring in a partner? Should I raise debt? Should I just go get money from the bank? Should I do whatever? I think that's really important, right? Is to understand that kind of underneath of things before you make decisions about where your business is going and how you're going to fund or finance all that.
Now, in particular, now at this particular time, and where things are difficult, and not only in North America but around the world, all directly relating to U.S. policy, and I'm not talking about politics now, but
Sure.
because of issues that are particularly relating to uh, tariffs, is that it has affected everything for in a lot of the rest of the world, because we are also much relying on the United States and becoming vulnerable of it. Obviously,
Hmm.
is that the relationships have been building for a long, long time. May it be in North America. What comes to mind is Mexico and Canada vis-a-vis the United States. Critically important for the elements that both Mexico bring and Canada may, but still caught in to politics to a certain amount. And then the other part, obviously, as it relates to Europe, DEC, which is the largest economic unity, in the world, in terms of size, economic size, but it has other challenges, because each country is somewhat different. It does not have the cohesion that we have
Hmm.
in North America of similar languages for all intents and purposes. Obviously, we have Canada and Mexico substantially. The business side speaks English, or we can speak Spanish to a certain extent, but those entities are working closely together. And then the other entity is, obviously China.
Right.
That
Yeah,
has
there's no doubt it is that the world has become a global marketplace, right? Like,
exactly.
we had, global trade with the fact it is that, the reality is that money is universal, right? Whether it's, yuan, rupee, dollars, pesos, it does, right? Like, money kind of is fluid to a certain degree. And as John and Jeremy are growing our business and trying to do whatever we're trying to do, whether it's dollars, rupees, yuan, what, right? Like money spends, right? And I'm trying to get there. And so oftentimes people don't really care where the money comes from, just so long as it shows up. I think from the tariffs side, it definitely is affecting how people think and how people practice, and plan on kind of a go forward. And so I'm an American, so my maybe purview of this is different than somebody that's listening from a different part of the world. Um, I think in my mind the having a degree of reciprocity and reciprocal tariffs makes sense, because why should if I sell you something and you sell me something, I'm paying you $10 and you're paying me $5, that doesn't seem to make sense. I'm sure that there's more to it than that, and my understanding is relatively nascent, but from a simplicity standpoint, that
Or
makes
maybe,
sense.
maybe it simply makes sense.
Maybe it just simply makes sense. Agreed. I think from trade partners, it is, the reality is, I think about where it is that you live. You know, I I would want to be friendlier and have the best relationships with each of my neighbors that are closest to me, and would worry about that first rather than the guy that lives across town. Right. And so I think that candidly, all three of us, between Canada, US, and Mexico, it is, if the three of us really got together and actually, march to the beat of the same drummer, and we're, got the egos out of the way, which will never happen. But if they did, candidly, the three of us as neighbors in North America, it is could really be a substantial force if we were talking the same language.
And we did, and we will, because even these difficult periods will not last, and maybe the midterms, or maybe whatever. So, but
Yeah.
for all the reasons that you indicated, is that there will be benefits to it in a sense. Not quite sure what they are, but But on the other hand, that, as you already said, that more and more the world, not only as it relates to economy, but also in terms of media, is becoming more and more global. Look at the
Agreed.
podcasting that we are doing today. We will
Yeah.
be podcasting around the world, and if I read the newspapers, that is substantially just today's news, not so much today's news. If I look at the news media, once I get through all the commercials and hear the news, that has a touch of politics, it has a touch of, the it is not the new media. The new media is podcasting in particular, that brings us globally together. Like I'm podcasting with you now from Arizona, but at the same time, I may be tomorrow podcasting somebody from Australia, from Athens, Greek, or anywhere around the world, on all kinds of different topics. So it brings us together more globally. And as we do that, in terms of business and understanding, the probably understanding in a lot of cases too much of what is going on. If you look at the Ukraine, very troubling what is happening there. Russia is troubling what is there. The Middle East is troubling, obviously, and so many other companies. Africa comes to mind in certain areas, South America, Venezuela, and on and on and on. We will understand how unique we are, because I do a lot of business in North America. I fly around a lot. And if I do, because of my background and having seen and lived there during the war years, saw what happened, still have the feeling of hunger and cold and anxiety, still PTSD as a result of it, saying that for those people that believe, respectfully, that if there is a war, after the war is over, everything goes back to normal, it simply doesn't. It will take generations, in some cases, affected my family, my parents and still is part of my life today. But if I fly around in North America, in particular the West Side, I love British Columbia. Obviously, I love Washington, Oregon, and the California, in particular in the transition as you go. I always sit by the window and I look outside and say, it's paradise. It is paradise. How can we be more fortunate than we are here?
Yeah.
And it
Agreed.
is the land of opportunity in terms of if you aspire to entrepreneurship or you want to do, and hard work yields result. And that's why I say to me, always here is attitude, passion, work ethic. What will follow is success, whatever that may mean to the individual. If it's building, as I wrote in this one, if it is building $1 billion company, if you want, or $1 billion entity, but the key is communications, and so and as it is to all the things that we do, is that we must be acquiring the skills and not, it is not being taught as well as it should and has to be. You must become a good or effective communicator in terms of, that's critical.
It is, and that will help you in your business. That will help you in your life. That will help you in your marriage. It'll help you with your kids, right? You've got to be able to communicate thought without the ands and the ums and the thises and the that's and that kind of a thing. And so ultimately, you need to get clear on thought, right? And go ahead.
Yeah, I like it, but the hum's the horse, and I like you saying it because another thing that happened to me, I wasn't a good communicator. I even already when I had my companies right up to 1990, I could communicate with 2 or 3 people in my organization, but outside of that, I wasn't very good. And so until my ex-sister-in-law took me down, she said, I want you to come with me to an organization called Toastmasters. I said,
Sure.
what's that all about? I never heard of it. And she said, it's about communication skills. And I said, okay, are you going to ask me anything? No, just sit there and watch it. I said, okay. So I went down there and I was sitting there watching, and halfway through the meeting, somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about you. I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. But I did. I stayed there for 10 years and I became a distinguished Toastmaster. And that's the highest level in Toastmasters. And that part changed my life. So between the war years, liberation of Canadians, the decision to make to go to Canada, the decision to start with nothing, but give it all that I got, attitude, passion, work ethic, build all the companies, and then the other part obviously became then nearly dying that triggered me into fitness and health, and hence the book about living young, dying old became important. That simply happened because I went to the gym, stayed in the gym for about 6 years, and already then was well into my 70s. Somebody said, hey, John, have you ever thought about competing? I said, me? Really? Yeah. And so I did. So I competed bodybuilding physique, came second bodybuilding, third in physique in Northern BC, qualified me for the provincials, and then it qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And now I'm training again. That's still how I look today, to go to the Arnolds next year in 2026.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I've been trying to get Arnold on my podcast. Now, if you know Arnold, tell him I'll be back. Jeremy, it was a pleasure and privilege to have you on my podcast. And for all those people watching us from around the world, let us know if you got a contact point, Jeremy, where people can contact you and maybe just share that with you if you can, with us if you can.
Certainly. Thanks for asking. So we're pretty easy to find. So it's Jeremy B. Hill. I'm pretty much on any social, whether it's, Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn or whatever. LinkedIn's pretty easy. You can go to our website, which is jb-capital.com, or just put in Jeremy B. Hill somewhere and I'm sure I'll show up. But yeah, if there's questions on finance or anything else it is that you're working on, finance, entrepreneurship, fatherhood, any of that kind of jazz, look me up. Love to get to know you.
And then for all those people watching us and saying this is interesting, as far as they want to see more of these kind of podcasts that we are doing, subscribe to my podcast and share it with others and like it and make comments if you can. And then look up Jerry's Hill's podcast or his website in particular in terms of the services that he has available. And this podcast, Jerry, will become available this afternoon. So we put it out
Wonderful.
as we presented it, and we get it out of the door very, very quickly.
That's great. John, really enjoyed the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry. Take care.